Welcome to Tagged Beyond the Award, the podcast that celebrates innovation, excellence, and leadership. Each episode dives into inspiring stories behind the nominees and winners of the TAG Awards, uncovering the breakthroughs, challenges, and triumphs that define their journey. Whether it's cutting-edge technology, transformative products, or visionary leadership, we're here to explore what it means to stand out and shape the future of your industry. Let's go beyond the award and into the heart of innovation. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.
Welcome back to Tagged Beyond the Award. My name is Justin Starbird, and I think this might be my favorite time of year and favorite types of interviews to do because we get to talk to the winners of the TAG Awards and the TAG Awards for MedTech. With me today is Mike Kohlberg, the General Manager of Codonics, and Cristy Berg, Vice President of OEM Marketing, Communications, and Global Trade Shows. Guys, thanks for joining me today and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
This is really exciting. This is also, you're one of only a small select group of two-time TAG Award winners. So, I mean, even more exciting.
Yes, very exciting.
Codonics won in the medical device category for medication safety and compliance. For listeners that are not familiar with Codonics and the safe waste system, help us understand for the first time, what it is that the system does, and and what was behind the innovation.
Chris, you want to take that?
Sure. So at Codonics, we focus on medication safety in the operating room, and specifically the moments where things can become inconsistent and difficult to manage. We started in this space with Safe Label System, which supports medication preparation by helping ensure prepared syringes are labeled in inconsistent, standardized way. And then at administration, our SLS Wave, that's an optimized barcode scanner that supports documentation into the electronic health record, like Epic or Cerner, when a drug is administered. So that's medication preparation administration. What we recognize over time is that there's really a third step that's just as important in the anesthesia workflow, and that's controlled substance waste. And every drop of a controlled substance must be accounted for. And that responsibility is often harder than it should be. In many ORs today, that process requires multiple manual steps, and it leaves gaps in accountability. Pharmacy is responsible to reconcile and dispense the waste documentation against the anesthesia record. When they don't match, pharmacy has to track down the anesthesia provider, who then has to try to recall the specific case, and this could be days later. That process is a huge burden to both anesthesia and pharmacy. It relies on memory, it introduces delays in charge capture for the hospital, and it creates additional work for the provider and the pharmacy team. The Codonics Safe Waste System, the product that we're being honored by the TAG Awards for innovation, that was designed to address waste and reconciliation at the point of care. So while the anesthesia provider is still in the room, the Safe Waste System, it identifies.
This is great.
Okay.
It's awesome. I feel like I've got the video in my head playing right now. I've seen, how this has played out. It's so neat. I love how you keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Just a few more things I'll add to it. It does 6 things. It identifies, it measures, it uses a spectrophotometer to assay the medication. It then wastes it into a retrievable container. It documents all of the witness information. It records the data that's needed for reconciliation, all in a streamlined workflow, again, at the point of care. And it does that in seconds. So it's simplified. What we've built is a way to bring safety, compliancy, standardization, and consistency across the perioperative medication workflow, from preparation to administration to waste and reconciliation.
So I think the most simple follow-up to that is, why hadn't anybody done this before in such a concise manner?
Yeah, I could take that. I think it's like any innovation, it's all about opportunity. And you have to be able to, we're in that market, we're in the perioperative environment. We are talking every day to anesthesiologists who actually have to use the product. But anesthesiologists typically don't work for the hospital. They're contracted. They perform a service in the perioperative environment. And we also talk to pharmacy, who is actually responsible for acquiring all the medications, dispensing them, and giving them to the anesthesiologist to use. So you're able to talk to pharmacy and anesthesia, who, by the way, two departments in the hospital that don't usually talk to each other.
Right.
They're in different worlds. So we bridge those two departments, and we say, okay, we know what pharmacy does and what ails them and what problems they have and what problems they'd like solved. And then we talk to anesthesiologists who have a totally different workflow in a totally different world, fast-paced, and they deal with the most dangerous medications in the entire controlled substances in the entire hospital. And so you talk to them, and they say what would make their life better, and we kind of put it together with this glue in the middle that tries to solve these problems. So having an opportunity to hear that, we know what the solution is. Sometimes knowing the solution is good, but you have to be able to take that and innovate that and bring it into a product that can be useful to both parties.
Yeah, I think our judges recognized that as they went through, the scoring, because that one of them said that the consistent theme was that you're solving a very real operational and compliance burden for the clinicians and healthcare administrators, and that it was clear you'd done your homework, right? And I think that speaks to your ability to be embedded with two groups that otherwise, like you mentioned, Mike, don't necessarily speak to each other. So when you were in that, when did the light bulb come on that this was a challenge and that this was an underserved area?
Well, the waste system came out. Actually, it was probably 5 years ago or so, where we were in the operating room and we knew that waste was important to both of these departments. But there wasn't a technology available to do that, and we weren't necessarily going to invent one. So we actually signed up. Signed up as a distributor for a company in Sweden that made a product that tested medications, mostly for chemotherapy. But we thought there was a good application for testing narcotics or controlled substances, because when a diversion happens, when someone diverts a medication, and as Cristy said, when they waste it, they just waste it into an adulterating container. They're wasting a clear liquid. It's a clear liquid. It could be saline. They could have went to the restroom, took some for themselves, filled it with saline, and then someone watched them squirt a clear liquid into an adulterating container. So we saw there was a problem with the ability to assay and test those medications, to at least keep honest. And so we brought on this product, but it was an expensive product. It was a standalone. It was more centralized. We had to put it in pharmacy because you couldn't afford to put it in every operating room, and it was cumbersome to use in an operating room. So we determined, and we sold many of them actually. But what it did was it still required pharmacy to go pick up those medications at the end of they don't waste them anymore. They put them in the return bin. They had to retrieve them. They had to bring them down to pharmacy. They had to randomly test them, and then that's a lot of work on both parties. But it was important to have, because if the DEA comes in and does an inspection and they watch you squirt this clear liquid, and they're going to ask you a question: how do you know that it's the narcotic that it is and not saline or been diluted? And so at least if they're doing some testing, they get a gold star, and at least they're doing something. So, but in doing that and selling that product, it was clear to us that the holy grail was to put it in the operating room, put it right at the point of care, make it done right there at the end of the case. Let's get rid of it. The provider that's in the operating room, he wants to waste this. He wants to get onto his next case and be done with it. In pharmacy, they have a responsibility to account for every drop. So we put the responsibility, we took it away from pharmacy and gave it to the provider. So in giving it to the provider, that's when we came up with the idea to put it in the operating room. But couldn't just do it overnight. We had to wait for the technology had to be available. We had to find a spectrophotometer that was small enough and low cost enough. And actually, what also enabled it is we have an installed base of safe label systems, already in the operating room being used to label syringes. So, and it has a computer in it, has a touchscreen in it. So instead of creating a device that has another computer and another touchscreen, we married the two together, and we use the screen and the computer and the touchscreen and the computer inside, and that kept the cost down. So the safe waste system is just a measuring device that does assay and reports information back to pharmacy. So we're able to get the cost down. Once you get the cost down and you got the right technology, then we can enter the market with a solution.
It does seem so simple. Another judge mentioned and highlighted how intuitive and simple the system is in practice. And then, that immediately led me, as I'm preparing for today and talking to you guys, often it is a lot easier to get difficult things or things with complexity into an environment like this versus something that seems so simple. And your design was clearly intentional in terms of how you implemented it and introduced it to the folks that are actually going to be using it. How much did you pay attention to design as you went through this development process from, initially maybe using the distributor product to mirroring it to, the safe label system?
Well, the distributed product, of course, was centralized. So we learned about that technology using a spectrophotometer to analyze both the medication and the concentration and low concentrations, especially because something like fentanyl can be diluted pretty heavily because it's a very strong medication, especially we sell a lot of children's hospitals. So it's diluted. Adult dose has to be diluted. So we knew the technology could be put into a wrapper and then to get the price down, since we already have the SLS and we're already in that market, that made it possible. But actually, one of the breakthrough things and one of the things that we did was we brought it to a couple of trade shows and showed it to in its prototype form to some anesthesiologists who actually have to use the product, and then pharmacy who actually appreciate the data that comes from the product. And getting their feedback was very important. For example, the reconciliation piece, even though we had the technology and we could waste and we could measure and we could, report that data back to pharmacy, we didn't find out about the reconciliation data until we showed the customer a product that can actually do the testing and everything. And then they said, well, what about this other pain that I have having to reconcile when it doesn't add up? You're going to measure, but what if it doesn't add up? They're going to send me an email 2 days later, asking me to remember where the 2 mils went in some procedure. And so we were unaware of that being a bottleneck. And then we found out it's a bottleneck for both pharmacy and anesthesia. So we bring the technology to market as part of it, but then listening to the customer and getting feedback, but and then implementing that was a kind of a breakthrough for us. But it's funny because the customer, I say this is kind of cliches, but the customer doesn't know what they don't know. They don't even know to ask the question until they see a technology that, oh, that could do that. Well, what about this? So you have to sometimes stimulate their thought process and, oh, you can help me here. Why can't you help me? Here's another process that you can help me with. And that's a process we spend a lot of time on, and we leverage our relationships with customers and being in that environment focused on that. And that feedback we take seriously and we try to implement if it makes sense.
Yeah. Cristy, from a marketing perspective where you're, charged with telling the story, a lot of times innovation conversations are around flashy new technology or software or AI. This is something that is a lot more practical and designed for use. How do you make the story sexy and get it adopted and create materials for the sales team to go out and educate the folks that will actually be using it?
Well, this piece was fun because this was kind of the last piece. We had preparation, we had administration, and then we got to marry in waste and reconciliation into it. So we have the whole platform, right? So we could tell the whole story from beginning to end. And that was actually we got to do that at the end of the year, and our customers really resonated with that story because now there's so many disparate pieces and things in the operating room. We're bringing it all together and bringing all the pieces together and making sure that preparation just doesn't happen here and administration happens here. It's preparation is passing to administration, is passing on to waste and reconciliation, and all the pieces come together.
It's so exciting to have that as a system and a platform now to share with the world, where this is sort of a recent development over where you have all these pieces. Mike, you talked a little bit about the input that went into, listening to what was missing, but what has the feedback been now? Are you getting data for, I guess this is for either one of you, data back that is that talks about, time saved, or incidences that I guess you don't know the problem happens if you solve it, right? Like, so do you compare data year over year and say there were less misses this year? How does a hospital, measure success by installing the system?
Before I answer that question, I'm going to go to Cristy's question a little bit. You asked how does she make marketing material, let's say, call it sexy or exciting, and actually, Cristy joins us at these trade shows, and when we talk about when we show this technology, she's actually watching the customer's reaction, and when we say there's a spectrophotometer in there, the customer's jaw actually drops.
Yeah.
And so, whoa, that's sexy, and when customers find out you put that technology in that little box, so we try to play on that as well. So that's part of what she does. In answer to your other question to me,
Well, actually, so I like that you bring that up, because I think that is so important, because education seems to be such an important part of this. And you mentioned trade shows, and I know, Cristy, that you're a certified trade show manager as well. I think we just did the awards in person at the MD&M South, presented by Informa in Charlotte, back in April. And I think in this industry, it is still so important to be able to shake hands with your customers and the people that you're going to be interacting with, because when there's a problem, they want to pick up the phone and know that you have their back, that you're going to help them solve that. And so I love that you see those reactions in person, and you get that feedback, from people, and it's not just a Zoom, or it's not just, some bot that they're talking to.
No, that FaceTime is priceless. When we have customers that just come back to see us, and they love our products. They love to use our products. They love the simplicity of the products. They love to give us input about the products and tell us everything that they love. With Safe Label System, we have people coming back and telling us, I love this product. If it wasn't for the audio or the audio voice coming out, I would have accidentally given this my patient the wrong medication. Being in front of the customer is fantastic. And that's one thing that our president and CEO believes in heavily, is that face-to-face, marketing. And we do, probably 25 shows a year at least, where we're have that FaceTime with our customers. And we find it invaluable. And just, a lot of times we're at shows where people don't have any equipment. We're the only people. Mike always calls it schlepping. We're the guys schlepping the boxes, and that's us. We're bringing our equipment in and sending it up. That's a thing, that they appreciate the most. They get to see it, and it's not that big, and they can actually see what it does. And it's, the minute they see it, they basically, they love it. They love it. Our customers love our products.
Mike, going back to that output piece of it, and starting to get the feedback from users, and what it's saving for time, what it's saving for incidents, and what else, like, what are you getting for feedback?
Here's what we're doing. So we got the feedback from two sources, anesthesia and pharmacy, last year. And then once we did that, then word got out that we had this product. And then we get customers that say, well, can we show it to our customer? And can we show it to, our staff? And so we set up virtual demos. We do several virtual demos a week. I've got one scheduled for tomorrow, in fact, where we'll actually bring in the diversion people in a hospital, the anesthesia and pharmacy, and we'll do a demo virtually and show them as if they were at a trade show. And by doing that, we get feedback from them, and we fine tune our quote sales pitch or marketing pitch or whatever. And it's funny because now we hit on almost every cylinder. So now, after doing many demos and getting many questions, the same questions asked, we have the answers for all the questions. We've learned all the important questions and implemented. And when we didn't have an answer for it, we developed an answer, because we're still developing the software to help solve some of these problems. So we fine tune it to where we really have a fine-tuned sales pitch. And then the providers get so excited. I just got an email yesterday from the director of anesthesia at New York Presbyterian, and they want to write a white paper. And they sent me this. Template. They want to write a white paper, and it addresses what you asked. They want to do a paper that talks about time and efficiency metrics, the average time per waste event, the average additional time due to waste. How many waste events do you have a day in a day? What is the financial impact of waste and testing? So they're anxious to write white papers about this because they know that, first of all, they're looking for subject matter that everybody's going to be interested in. And that's the whole thing. Everybody is interested in this. So this problem exists in every hospital that's out there. It's amazing how they solve it. They don't all solve it the same way, but that's the kind of feedback we get. And so we take advantage of that, and we'll be working with her to write a paper. That all takes time, but we accumulate all that information and market any way we can to get the messaging out to the market.
Well, third-party validation, Cristy, that must make your job easy.
Those are great, right?
It's fun.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, it just makes it fun. It does, because to when you really have something that solves and we're in we even with our safe label system, it was difficult to appeal to both markets, anesthesia and pharmacy, because quite honestly, we're selling a product to pharmacy because anesthesia can't label a syringe properly. So it's a clerical thing. So it's kind of difficult. But when you have a product that helps pharmacy, and there's a win for them, and then there's a win for anesthesia, and they both are trying to solve this problem that they've both been plagued with for years, and they have a requirement by the DEA, their licenses on the ropes for it. It's exciting when they see a solution and they embrace it immediately.
Well, my next question was going to be about that partnership, and you sort of have already alluded to it pretty heavily, and that is, Codonics is a really great partner for healthcare organizations that are looking to scale. Especially, it allows for more innovation from a standpoint of starting off safely, right? Talk a little bit about what those partnerships look like, and how these hospitals really lean on you for that, and I guess, and then by extension, how you help galvanize two units that don't necessarily get to have a lot of time together.
Well, when again, it gets back to solving a problem for both of them, and they see value in you, because a lot of companies nowadays, especially the bigger companies, they want to sell you a box, and then you can implement the box, and they don't come talk to you for another 5 years until you have to replace the box with a new box. Yeah. And so what we do is we listen to the customer along the way, and we give them solutions. So what happens is we build relationships, and so when we see them at a trade show, or we see them in person when we're at a site, they'll confide in us. They'll tell us, what do you hear here in the market? What do you see here? You guys came out with this. What are you working on now? And then we encourage them to tell us, well, what can we do to help you? And so that relationship and partnership with those hospitals is key. And like I said, we have customers that want to write papers now about some of the things we're doing, because it helps them and it helps us, and it moves the market in a safer way. Everybody's looking to be safer, and they know in this MedTech market, I mean, technology can help you or it can hurt you. But when it helps you and it makes things safer and it makes you more efficient and it saves the hospital money, then it's a win-win all the way around. And they know that we come out with products that fit that need.
Yeah. The TAG awards stand for technology, achievement, and growth. And I feel as though, Codonics has really been able to, check each one of those boxes. And, I think, the validation that comes from our judges and hearing what you've accomplished so far, how simple you've made it, it really speaks to the core of why the awards were started. That said, the product has also been, part of years of development, and you've had some iterations, and there's execution that goes behind the scenes to make it all come together. What does this recognition for the TAG Award, or from the TAG Awards, actually mean to the Codonics team, and, by extension, the customers that are going to be, purchasing the product?
Cristy, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I think receiving the TAG Award, it's an honor for our team. And what makes it meaningful is that it validates a lot of the work that isn't always visible. This wasn't an obvious problem to solve. Controlled substance waste and reconciliation, they've been part of the anesthesia workflow for a long time. There were ways to handle it, but they were manual and they really haven't reduced the burden. So seeing the safe waste system get recognized for innovation, it just reinforces that effort matters. And I mentioned earlier that we have a motto at Codonics that we build products that our customers love to use. And that's important to us because if providers love to use something, it means that it's intuitive, that it fits into their workflow, and it's actually solving a real problem. And the TAG Award, it brings alignment across the team, engineering, product management, regulatory, marketing, sales, around that idea that we're not just building technology, but we're solving real workflow challenges in environments where that really matters. So it is something that we're all very proud of. And our products, we've built a reputation for delivering solutions that providers trust, and a recognition like this reinforces both the quality of our team and I think the direction that we're heading. So it gives the team confidence, and I think it reinforces that we're building something that has a real impact in healthcare.
And getting a TAG award 2 times from a third party independently looking at it. I mean, we could brag about our product all we want, but when you get it from somebody like you guys, and it's twice in a row, and other awards that we gotten for other things, that all adds up. It means something to customers, obviously. I think it does, indirectly independent, but it also means something internally to the worker bees behind the scenes, the engineers writing it, the engineers listening to the engineer in production doing the work to make this stuff happen. It means a lot to them because they're not in front of a customer. They don't really see that or appreciate it. But when they see an independent company say, whoa, this is cool stuff, it means something to them too.
Well, it means something to us to see that, you guys come back and put in a new element to the safe label system that really helps continue to evolve your platform, and trust us with that evaluation as well. I mean, I think that's something that's really important for us from that perspective as well, and so we're just so excited to see the continued iteration of new stuff coming out, the commitment you have to innovation, and the team to show their success in this way is really exciting. So I'll leave you guys on this. As we look ahead, we're going into May now of 2026. Goodness gracious, we're still time flies when you're having fun, right? What's next? What do you see on the horizon for the safe label system from last year, the extension of the safe waste system this year? Where do you see the future of prioritizing the compliance, accountability, and operational efficiency that your customers and clients are so desperate for?
Well, we've introduced the safe waste system to the market, but we haven't brought it to the market yet. It's not commercialized. So we're focusing on commercializing, which includes the science behind it has all been figured out. It's all working. We're entering into production parts and getting ready for production of the product. But then there's the software that has to be written and improved on and implemented, and then it has to be commercialized. And once it's not when it's a new technology like this, it doesn't just you don't just flick your fingers and they implement it everywhere in the hospital. You get a big hospital system or just a normal hospital system with 2 or 3 hospitals. They're going to try it out at one hospital first because, okay, they're going to walk before they run. They put their toe in the water, and they're going to try it out. That's going to take some time. And then once they see it, then they're going to implement, and then they have to budget for it. So it takes a long time. Hospital budgets for capital equipment because they don't just buy one of these. They got to buy one for every room, operating room. So it's a big expenditure. So capital expense and budgeting go through that. But then we're going to learn a lot as well in the market, because once we get in the market, we've learned that we learn from the market. And what we've done in the past, and this is part of our strength, is even with our safe label system, by going in the market and people using the product in the real world, not theoretically what we think it's going to solve, what it actually solves. Customers then ask you for more stuff, and then putting that stuff in there and giving it to them that's an evolution in the product that we've done with all of our products. But we tell customers that we're not going to leave you out. We'll get you this stuff, but then new customers, and you have the benefit of all the stuff that we put in from these other customers. So we continually improve the product to make it better to solve those problems. And at the same time, we keep our eyes open. There are other opportunities, which I can't talk about now, but there are other opportunities in this environment that we see that we can impact and be that glue between pharmacy and anesthesia and solve more problems.
So I hear new nominations for next year, Cristy.
That's what I'm setting you up for that, Justin.
Cristy, did anything that we missed? I know you and I talked a lot about, about Codonics and what you guys are doing over the last couple of years. So I want to make sure, we don't miss anything to share more about the company.
No, for us, I think it's just about staying close to our customers, seeing the gaps, building the solutions that fit naturally into their workflows. And, we have a great engineering team and we have great leadership. So it's been great.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing. And I think it was one of your questions earlier alluded to the fact that talking about the company, if I was a founder and I was starting a company, I wanted to follow in kind of our footsteps. There's a couple things that we've done that I think is important to any company, and we've learned over time, and it impacts both two sides. There's an impact on the operational side of the company, which involves the people behind the scenes, the accounting and the engineering and the production and all those people, operations part of the company, and then there's the customer sales and marketing, customer-facing things. On the operations side, we have a philosophy, and it's always the president. And it's pretty simple. You hire good people, you give them a good wage, you give them the best tools you can give them, and they make good stuff. I mean, that's just the way it works. You make an environment and a culture that thrives in that. And then on the flip side of it, with a customer, it's really a simple recipe. You just listen. You get it right. You get the opportunities come to you if you listen. You don't necessarily, and again, there's a difference between leaders and followers. And innovation comes from leaders. I mean, I give the analogy, Apple and Samsung and the iPhone. I mean, Apple innovated. They came out with the iPhone. And then Samsung followed them and came out with their version of it, but they didn't invent it. And so they're following. They're both successful companies. But I think to be an innovator and to be in innovation, you got to listen and you really have to implement and you have to solve problems. So that's my advice.
I really appreciate that, and you sharing that for, future nominees and founders and, folks that are, listening that are just getting started, because, as the saying goes, no overnight success happens overnight. It usually takes, quite a long time to get there. And it's neat to see a company like Codonics that continues to put out, new products, push the boundaries of what's possible and think simply in complex environments. And I think that's pretty neat to see on a regular basis. And I just feel, fortunate on behalf of our team to be able to recognize you guys 2 years in a row for such unique and novel ways to solve problems.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Great. Well, guys, I hope we get to do this a third time next year.
Yeah. I'm already setting you up there, Justin.
Yeah, I know this is fantastic. So I really appreciate it. We'll keep doing these shows because you keep them fresh and lively. It's really exciting. So
okay,
thank you both for joining me.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of my guest today, Cristy Berg, Vice President of OEM Marketing, Communications, and Global Trade Shows, and Mike Kohlberg, the General Manager of Codonics. We were recognizing the safe waste system in the medical device and medication safety and compliance category this year. So congratulations again. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.
Welcome to Tagged Beyond the Award, the podcast that celebrates innovation, excellence, and leadership. Each episode dives into inspiring stories behind the nominees and winners of the TAG Awards, uncovering the breakthroughs, challenges, and triumphs that define their journey. Whether it's cutting-edge technology, transformative products, or visionary leadership, we're here to explore what it means to stand out and shape the future of your industry. Let's go beyond the award and into the heart of innovation. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.